Oh, hello there. I didn't see you come in. I'm glad you're here though, because we're having a little hot chocolate today, and the temperature of this hot chocolate, sadly, I regret to inform you, is going to be going down substantially over the course of our little conversation. But that's okay, because we're going to be looking at integers today and figuring out just what that difference is. So you might be wondering, what is an integer? Our unit in chapter 9 is adding and subtracting integers. Well, an integer is a type of number. We're going to look at several types of numbers you've already looked at before to put this into context. Okay, I'm going to use something just to obstruct. Okay, here we go. So let's start with the natural numbers. So a natural number is any whole number. It's not a fraction, not a decimal, and it can't be 0 or negative. So when you're a little kid and you first learn to count your toes, your fingers, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And unless you really didn't play safely, hopefully you didn't have 0 fingers or toes. Okay, but as you get a little older, once you're in kindergarten maybe, you learn about this number 0. That's right. Perhaps even there was a schoolyard bully who called you a 0. Unpleasant memories, but just know that no, you're not a 0. You're a someone. But a whole number includes 0 as well. But no negatives. Once again, no negatives. When you're young and carefree, there are no negative numbers. But this is where we come to integers. With integers, we include all those natural and whole numbers, but we also go to the negatives. As you can imagine, with all of these kinds of numbers so far, there's an infinite number of these types of numbers because you can go on forever into the positives. With integers as well, though, you can go on forever into the negatives. So you might be wondering what other kinds of categories are there. And we've actually worked with these other categories of numbers before. The rational numbers, so if you have something like 1.5 or negative 2.3, all of those, so all integers are considered rational numbers. And but rational numbers, the thing about them is they have to also either terminate or repeat. Meaning when we have, say, 2.5, that ends. There's nothing past 2.5. When we looked at, though, the bar notation, so for example, if you take 1/3 or 1 divided by 3, you might remember it comes out to be 0.3 repeating. And even though that goes on forever, because it's a predictable pattern, that would also be a rational number. Same as if it were, say, 0.13 repeating. Another kind of number, this is the last kind you'll actually look at in junior high, at least anyway, are the irrational numbers. And those have to be non-repeating and non-terminating, meaning it goes on forever, but there's no pattern that you can establish. An example of this, and this is, maybe we've seen a few with division, but the most famous irrational number is arguably pi. Because, those numbers, they keep going forever, but there's no predictable pattern. It's not like 1, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4. These are all of these in the family of real numbers, which is pretty exciting. Imaginary numbers, you don't look at even in high school, really, unless things have changed since I was a young whippersnapper like yourself. So this, by the way, has got... It's a chocolate chip flavored hot chocolate, which can be very disturbing because it leaves a residue at the bottom. But I've also mixed in a little bit of instant coffee with it too, just to give me that perk I need. Not that I need it. I can quit anytime I want. Okay. But integers. Integers are the name of the game here. Integers. And so we are going to be looking at simply adding and subtracting. So some of the things you might have thought were true in elementary are still true. You always want to remember those basics, and we'll be seeing these integers in a number of word problems, so you want to make sure you're reading carefully. Does it make sense? So a couple of the chapters you'll note that I didn't assign were using integer chips, where you take a blue to represent a positive, a red to represent a negative, or vice versa, and you pretty much trade them off. So you might be wondering, how could you add a negative? How could you subtract a negative number? Like, what does that actually look like? Well, I'm glad you asked. let's talk about money, shall we? Let's say that I have $5. Oh yes, look at that. 5 lovely dollars right here. And rather than draw a loonie for each one, I'm going to draw a $5 bill. But unfortunately, someone has just sent me a bill. Someone has sent me my bill for the internet. And it was fortunately a very generous offer. But the bill is $3. So that's money that I have to pay. So you can think of this in terms of, we have a positive 5, and you can think of it a couple ways. Normally we would think, okay, we're simply going to subtract 3, correct? Because that's $3 that's taken away from my total. You could do that, but the way you're going to see it on the questions is that when you are subtracting something and they ask you, well, how much do you have left? It will often be presented in the form of adding a negative. So we're adding something, this bill that I'm getting from my internet, but what we're adding is a negative. So then the question is, what is our sum? When we add up two things or more, it is called a sum. When we subtract, it's called a difference. That's the difference between them. So we have 5. Now you'll often see in this unit the positive integers with a plus before them, but keep in mind, if there's no sign, it's always a positive. You'll see more often, moving on, all positives will just say 5, not plus 5. So if we take positive 5 and we add negative 3, it's the exact same thing as subtracting 3, right? This is very basic stuff from grade 1. But just note, if we're adding a negative, it's the same as subtracting. So our number is going to go down, but 5 minus 3, or 5 plus negative 3, comes out to be 2. Comes out to be positive 2. That's right. Okay, let's look at it. I know this might seem bafflingly simple because it does, some of it go back to grade 1, if not earlier. Let's say, though, I have my $5 bill and someone else gives me another $5 bill. Fantastic. 5 plus 5. Yes. So what would that be? 2 positives. I'm even going to put the positive integer sign here. 5 plus 5 is positive 10, correct? Yes. So that's really all there is to the first couple topics about adding integers. Now, it gets a little bit tricky. Let's look at some other cases, because we're going to go into some where we have our sum end up being a negative. So let's talk about temperature, shall we? They look at number lines quite a bit. And so a number line is very much kind of like a thermometer. We can see the difference between the temperature, particularly when we're subtracting. But let's say we start off, it's a beautiful early spring day, it's 3 degrees. But then, suddenly, it gets 8 degrees colder. So a way we can think of this, you can think of it as subtracting 8 degrees from that, 3 minus 8. Or if you're looking at, okay, we are changing it by this much, we can look at adding a negative 8. Honestly, if you have something like this, if you have it shown to you as positive 3 plus negative 8, there's absolutely nothing wrong, just if you want to make it simpler for yourself, in turning that into 3 minus 8. Because we're used to thinking of just addition, subtraction, correct? So what is the new temperature if it was 3 degrees and it goes down by 8? So before we get the answer, some of you are already probably there. If we draw a thermometer here, whoa, I can draw, okay. So we got 0 degrees, 1, 2, 3. And down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh, I hardly gave myself enough room. I guess I'm not so great at drawing the thermometers. Oh, but we're not going down all the way to minus 8, are we? 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go down to minus 5. Okay, so think of it this way. Here's my thermometer. Let's center this. Okay, so it was 3 degrees, but we're subtracting 8. So we are going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. when we subtract 8 degrees, it becomes, our total sum at the end is -5. So that is what the new temperature will be. Now, when you're writing it on a statement like here with a negative number, you want to keep that in brackets, just so it doesn't get confusing. With positives, once you take, if you just want to write it without the positive sign, you can take away the brackets. Okay, and so that's our look at what some addition would look like with integers. Now, subtraction is really not any more difficult, but sometimes the way that these word problems are presented can make it just a little bit trickier. I think it's possible for you to read the pen on the paper, so I'm going to refrain from using the Sharpie, just so I can use two sides of the paper a bit better. Okay, so when we have a negative, let's talk about money again, because I'm a materialistic, money-obsessed person. That's right. It's all about the bottom line for this guy. Okay, so let's say we've got $10. That's right. And I had some other bills, but $10 is what I had, and someone forgives me the bill I had. My internet company calls and they say, guess what? You do not have to worry about this bill that you have. So if $10, let's say $10 was like the total value of everything that I owned, and then they forgave this bill from me. That would be taking away a negative. So let's say it's a $4 phone bill. I am subtracting a negative. So if I'm taking away a negative, what do you think would happen to our total result? This is good. I think I can see myself finishing this. Okay, and that's right. If we have two negatives, it's the same. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So let me hold this a bit closer so the light doesn't blind you. Yes, so 10 minus -4 would be 14. That's right. Okay. So we have a set of rules here with integer operations, and the rule basically is if our signs are the same, if we're adding a positive, like basic addition, it will be a positive. Your number will increase. If you are subtracting a negative, like we just did, your number will increase. If you are adding something negative, though, like someone's giving me an internet bill, then our number will decrease. If we are, though, now subtracting a positive, like you had 6 apples and now I'm going to take away 3 positive apples, it will also be negative. So note here, here we go. So our sign rules. And it makes sense, right? You're taking away something negative. It's saying I am not happy. That means you are happy, right? Because the not cancels the other not out. Okay, so do keep that in mind. So pretty straightforward, I hope. It does make sense. Where it still gets tricky is with some of our word problems. So let's say, for example, we talk about temperature. When they say, you'll note on the chapter in the textbook about temperature and wind chill they discuss, they say the temperature decreases by 5 degrees. And the way they write that is rather than just say -5, they say we're adding and -5. Where they look at subtraction, though, but you know now, that's the same as just going -5. Where subtraction comes in, though, is when we look at differences. And so this is the reason why a subtraction answer is called a difference. So let's say, for example, we're talking about two temperatures. And they say it was -12 degrees on Monday, but on Tuesday it was 15 degrees. It was like a big Chinook or something. And they want to know, they don't want to, you know the starting and the end point, but they want to know what is the difference between those. So let's look at this a couple ways, shall we? They say the difference between Monday and Tuesday. Well, okay, you could take Monday and subtract Tuesday, but wouldn't the difference between them be the same either way? We're going to find out here. Okay, so we're going to go -12 minus 15. And I'll even write in the plus 15 here. So I put them all nicely in brackets. I'll put a little squiggle so we cut off our previous question we had. So minus 12 minus positive 15. So that is, if we're subtracting a positive, that means that our number should get smaller. So that's the same as minus 12 minus 15. It becomes minus 27. So negative 27 is our answer here. So there was negative 27 degrees of difference between the two. So now we should have seen that it wouldn't make any sense if let's say it had gone the other way. Let's say we had seen a difference between minus 12 and plus 15. If, let's say, you just added that, if it had come out to be positive and you'd seen the difference was 3, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? To go from minus 12, if you're looking at the thermometer, to plus 15, like the huge gap here, this huge gap, and to say that was just 3 degrees, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're subtracting a positive in this case gave us our answer. But let's work it the other way around, right? Because they said, what is the difference between those 2 days? What happens, though, if we take Tuesday's temperature and subtract Monday's? Okay, so Tuesday was plus 15, and we're going to, once again, subtract, because it's a difference, but we're going to subtract negative 12. Okay, so plus 15 minus negative 12. So you'll remember that when we subtract a negative, it is the same as adding. So our number is going to go up. If you want, you can, just to simplify this for yourself, you can even convert it. Convert those 2 negatives into a positive. I would do this. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep it simple for yourself, right? Because we're used to thinking in terms of positives or just one operation, right? So 15 plus 12 is 27. So oh my goodness, that pretty much shows the difference in temperature in the hot chocolate, actually. About 27 degrees probably from when I started. So is it negative 27 or is it 27? Truth be told, the difference, the sheer amount that it goes is 27. But if they're asking you, like, what direction did it go, in this case, it did get colder. Oh, no. Yes, that's right. No, it got warmer. It did get warmer. So you want to make sure you're reading correctly, and honestly, quite honestly, whether you have negative 27 or 27, whether it's going up or down, you just have to read the question and understand that to see which direction it was going. And there's a reason why. There's actually a specific term for 2 numbers like these. And they are known as opposite integers or 0 pair integers, because if you added these both together, what would you get? If you paired them together, it would be 0. That's right. And they're on opposite ends. So there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you can understand the question and say, yes, the temperature, there was a difference of 27 degrees. Honestly, in that case, if they're just asking for the difference, it doesn't necessarily matter whether it went up or down. They just want to know how much of a change was it. But, of course, if they're asking, in this case, was it a decrease or was it an increase, in what direction, then you'd want to say which direction it was. And so it never hurts to say which direction it is, to say that in this case it increased by 27 degrees. That was the difference. Okay, so that is addition and subtraction of integers. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Feel free to email me with any questions, and until next time.